Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to another devotional. I was really struggling this week on what I was going to do my devotional on. My brain just kind of went blank. And so, yesterday for you guys, because you're now watching this on Friday, but it's today for me right now. It's confusing. Anyway, today, in my Bible reading, I'm going through the book of Hebrews. Again, Illuminated Bible, not a sponsor. Also, side note, I just got the entire Old Testament in the Illuminated Bible, and I'm psyched. I'm so excited. So I'm like set for the next few years or so. So anyway, I'm in Hebrews chapter 6, and the first half of the chapter, I was like, what? I'm so confused. So I still have a lot of research to do on the first half of the chapter because I was like, either my brain is just dead right now and I can't understand this, or I just need to dig deeper into it. But then the second half of the chapter, I was like, guys, this is insane. It blew my mind. So I was like, okay, God, I guess I know what I'm going to do my devotional on this week. So I'm going to read Hebrews chapter 6, starting at verse 13, and I'm going to go till the end of the chapter if you want to follow along. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself, saying, "Surely I will bless you and multiply you." And thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. For people swear by something greater than themselves, and in all their disputes an oath is final for confirmation. So when God desired to show more convincingly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it with an oath, so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Okay, so super, super cool. And this is one of those passages where I read it and I immediately understood, but I was like, okay, how do I put this into words? Have you guys ever understood a concept in your brain and you're like, it's in there, I understand it. It's almost like a word picture, but to actually try to speak it to someone else seems impossible. So I was really trying to figure out how to explain how this blew my mind. But then I was thinking about, I'm sure we've all done this before. You're trying to convince someone that you're telling the truth, and you say oh, I swear I'm telling the truth, or some people say, oh, I swear on my mother's grave, or something like that. And I was thinking about how meaningless that oath, if you want to call it, is, or that promise, because I'm a human being. I'm broken and sinful. I can lie like that, no problem. So saying, oh, I swear on my life, or I swear on my mother's grave, that doesn't mean anything, because I'm a human being. I sin, I lie all the time. We try to convince people that we're telling the truth by saying something real important, oh, obviously my life is so valuable to me, so I swear on my life. And we say that and we don't realize how empty that promise is, because I can those are just words. There's nothing to back those up. We all know that we are all capable of lying because we're sinful human beings. So when people say stuff like that, it's okay, I don't know how valuable your life is to you. I don't know how valuable your mother is to you. That means nothing. But when God wanted to assure his people that his promises were true, it says there was no one greater by whom to swear. God can't swear on behalf of us or on behalf of his creation. Everything is lower than God. So he swore on himself because he is the greatest being, the greatest power, the greatest fill in the blank out of anything in the entire world. So he swore on himself. And then I love how it says that, let me find it here. so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have a strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. So he like solidified it by making it two unchangeable things. And let me see if I can try to explain this. It's like a circle, like it's unbreakable. It's like an infinity loop. Like it just keeps going and going because God is God, obviously. And we know that part of God's characteristic is that he is unchanging. Like he cannot change. Micah chapter 3 verse 6, I the Lord do not change. And then in James we see that he says, I do not change like the shifting shadows. Like he is solid, he is there, like he is unmovable, unbreakable, unchangeable. We know that. I hope that and pray that you believe that. And then he is not able to tell a lie. That is part of God being God. So he can't change his mind. Once he has said something, that is true, that is fact, it's also unchangeable. So he who is God was unchangeable, and he made an oath swearing on himself that he would keep this promise. So it's just like this unbreakable loop because God is God and he is who he says he is. And so he then made a promise. And that promise is based off of who he says he is. He's saying, I promise this and I make this oath based off of myself. So it's like this never-ending circle because you're like, okay, God is who he says he is and he made this promise. But what if he breaks his promise? Well, he can't because he's God and he's unchangeable and he made this promise, so he can't go back on. It's just this constant circle. That's where there's that like that word picture that I had in my brain of like a circle. Like there's nowhere to break it. Like it just keeps going and going and going and going. So God is never going to change. And so when he makes a promise, he is not going to break it because that's who he is. Like it just broke my mind thinking about this. And so then at the end, when it says that this is the hope that we have, like our hope is greater than any hope ever imaginable because our hope is in something that does not change. Like when we put our hope in a human being, there's always that little like thing in the back of your mind of like, oh man, like I really hope that they do what I ask them to do, or I really hope that that they come today when I've invited them to whatever. Like we put our hope in human beings, and there's always that twinge of like, I don't know if it's actually gonna happen. And that's not real hope. That's wishful thinking. But hope in God, there's no doubt. We don't have to go, oh man, okay, really hope that God comes through on this. Like, he has to come through on it because he's God. He would no longer be God anymore. And so the promises that he has made to us are unbreakable, unchangeable. Like, they can't be broken. Nothing that we can do can ever change them. And I love in verse 15 when it says, and thus Abraham, having patiently waited, obtained the promise. And I think time is a huge aspect of this because we think, oh, God broke his promise. No, but it maybe just didn't happen in your timing. Maybe it's going to happen 20 years from now. I was reading a book this week and a pastor prayed and said, oh, wow, how great would it be if someone stepped up in our church to fill this role? And 20 years later, someone stepped up to fill that role. And in my brain, I'm like, okay, that was like, that prayer took forever. But God still answered it. He still kept his promise of finding someone to fulfill that role. It just didn't happen in our timing. Our timing would have been for someone to come and like knock on his door and say, hey, I'll fulfill that role like today. But it happened 20 years later. It still happened. They had to wait patiently, just like Abraham had to wait patiently, but God still fulfilled his promise. Guys, I just think this is so cool. And I've been reflecting a lot on the word hope recently with everything that is going on in our world. And I just think that it is so encouraging that it says right here, we have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. And so whatever you are going through right now, remember that you have hope in an unchangeable God who has made promises that cannot be broken. And so read through the scripture, write down the promises that God has made to us, because those promises that he made 6,000, 4,000, 2,000 years ago, they still apply to us today because time does not affect him. He is unchangeable and unbreakable, and his promises last forever. Okay, that was my exciting rant for today. I hope that was an encouragement to you guys, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you guys later. Bye.